This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
From being the first Indian jeweler to be featured on the Christie's catalogue cover to having Kate Winslet adorn his pieces at the Oscars, Nirav Modi, with stores from Madison Avenue to Macau, was living a truly glittering life. But then fortunes turned, and he went from being on the rich list to a most wanted list.
Big hunt for India's biggest thief, Nirav Modi, is hotting up. More than 11,000 crores siphoned off one of India's biggest banks, the Punjab National Bank.
This is the biggest corporate fraud that has taken place in India.
It was now clear that all that glitter was just keeping the glare away from web of dummy companies, fraudulent documents, and a scam bigger than ever seen before. From fugitives to failed kidnappings to a blame game and a potential asylum, the story has more twists and turns than the latest Friday release. This is the story of Nirav Modi. We get you the investigative insights.
Nirav Modi was actually investigated by other agencies also. Though he was being probed by the Income Tax Department and the DRI, that information wasn't shared with the other agencies.
The behind-the-scenes buzz of bankers.
You all missed the first sign of it. It all happened in one branch by one person who remained unnoticed. He was on the same desk for 7 years and doing the same work. He was due for transfer twice, and mysteriously both the times there was somebody in the bank who stopped it.
And what could really happen next with Nirav Modi? Is he really coming home, or is there a twist again?
Nirav Modi is very likely to have applied for asylum. Nirav selected Fitzgerald in the appeal part of his case. He's known as the devil's advocate. He's actually considered to be one of the best extradition barristers.
It's Tuesday, November 15th. I'm your host, Anupriya, and you're listening to the story of Nirav Modi, the flawed and fallen diamond magnate, on the Morning Brief, brought to you by the Economic Times. Well, we first head to London, where all the action has been, not just the last week, but over the last 6 years, between Vijay Mallya to now Nirav Modi. Naomi Canton, journalist from the United Kingdom, who has been reporting all the happenings for Times of India, joins us now to give us the real picture and answer some tough questions. Is Nirav really coming back home, or are there loopholes left? Naomi, thank you for joining us here on the Morning Brief.
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Naomi, Nirav Modi's extradition is being held by the higher court in London in a remote order. Before we tackle what next, take us through what the judgment really said.
Yes, so the judgment came on Wednesday in the Administrative Court of the High Court, told us that it was going to be a remote hand down, which means that you have to just contact the court and request the judgment to be emailed to you. It was obviously a very lengthy judgment by two High Court judges, and they had listened to Nirav's barrister predominantly arguing why the district judge in Westminster Magistrates Court had made a mistake in ordering his extradition, and that in fact that should be overturned. And Edward Fitzgerald, KC, the barrister for Nirav, he was actually only allowed to argue on two topics. One was the fact that Nirav could suffer torture and inhuman and degrading treatment in Arthur Road Jail in Mumbai. And the other one, what's called Section 91, which is that it would be oppressive or unjust to extradite him. And what the barrister did was said that that was because he was depressed and suicidal, and therefore it would be very oppressive to send him to India. But the judges in their judgment went into great depth and detail about this, and their judgment was focused mainly on the argument about suicide risk and depression. And they agreed he was depressed and suicidal and had had suicidal thoughts, but they didn't feel the suicidal thoughts were severe, and they found his depression to be moderate. So they didn't find him to have a severe depression, and he didn't have psychotic symptoms, they said. And that combined meant that he didn't quite reach the threshold needed to be judged that your mental condition is such that it would be oppressive to extradite you, because there's a particular threshold you have to meet. And it's actually based on case law, and it's called the Turner Proposition. So that was the finding. Another key element of the judgment was that they were really happy with the assurances given by the government of India, which were very detailed assurances about the kind of medical treatment he can access from Arthur Road Jail, including private treatment. And because of that, those assurances offset the risks of him committing suicide, although they admitted that you can never guarantee you can prevent someone committing suicide, but that the assurances did, the best possible job of doing that.
I'm going to come and talk about a little bit more about the barrister that's been defending Nirav Modi as well, Naomi, in a bit. But I want to draw a comparison on the whole depression route, suicidal thoughts. It's something that has been used before to ward off extradition by high-profile cases, as was in the case of Assange's as well.
Yes, that's right. So this was the exact argument Assange used, and ironically, he had the same barrister, Edward Fitzgerald. In fact, I don't know how familiar people in India are with the Shree Dewani case. He was that British Indian who was accused of murdering his wife, was their honeymoon in South Africa, and then he went into a mental institution. So both Shree Dewani and Julian Assange both managed to get their extradition rejected on the grounds that they were heavily depressed and likely to commit suicide. So it has been used, and that's obviously why the barrister was going down that route with Nirav Modi. And it was, throughout the case from the very outset, this idea of him being depressed was brought up again and again. And then the depression got worse and worse and exacerbated by lockdown and the COVID pandemic. And then sort of towards the end, he was heavily depressed and had been considering suicide. And that was the way the case progressed. But it didn't persuade the judges. And I did speak to a barrister about this, and he reckoned that one of the key factors is the assurances by the government of India, because he was telling me that one of the problems with Assange and Dewani were that the judges were not satisfied with the assurances from the USA and South Africa.
So I want to now come to the barrister in question, Mr. Fitzgerald. He's got a key nickname as well now. What can you tell us? Because there are a lot of common clients across the board from the lot that have been asked for extradition from the Indian government.
Yeah, he's actually considered to be one of the best extradition barristers in Britain. He's known as the devil's advocate. And he has earned a very good reputation for himself because he has acted in some very high-profile cases. He acted in Laurie Love's case, the computer hacker, that the US was seeking to extradite, and he got that extradition completely stopped. He also represented Jabir Motowala, who was said to be the CEO of the D Company in Pakistan. And he had actually been caught in a sting operation by the FBI trying to sell drugs to these FBI agents. So there was considerable evidence against him. But in that case, Edward Fitzgerald managed to get the extradition request withdrawn. And Jabir Motowala went back to Pakistan a free man. And in fact, Nirav selected Fitzgerald in the appeal part of his case. And he'd actually used Claire Montgomery in the Westminster Magistrates Court, which was the same barrister that Vijay Mallya had used. And he obviously, as you know, Vijay Mallya lost all his cases. So Nirav, on appeal, decided to switch to Fitzgerald.
Which gets us to the next question now. What is the road ahead? Is it a sure shot homecoming for Nirav Modi, or does he have any other routes at this point to appeal this?
Yeah, it's very interesting. He's going to go down the same direction that Vijay Mallya did, because obviously the same happened to Vijay Mallya. He lost his appeal in the High Court. So the next step is to get a point of law of public importance certified by the High Court, that there is such a point of law of public importance in his case. And his barrister may well use the Turner proposition for that. And then he has to get leave to appeal in the Supreme Court. That means permission to appeal. And he can apply for permission in the High Court or in the Supreme Court to get that. But if he doesn't get this public point of law of public importance certified, then in fact, that's the end of the road, because the Supreme Court cannot hear his case. So that's going to be his first step. And then the next thing he can try, if he fails at that, is to get an injunction from the European Court of Human Rights, which is known as a Rule 39. And that would be him saying to them that there's an immediate risk of threat to his life or health in this jail in India, and they have to stop his extradition immediately. And that's something that Sanjeev Chawla tried before he got extradited to India, but his was rejected. And most of these requests are rejected, though a small number get through. So that would be his next step. And then if that failed, he would actually have to get extradited within 28 days. However, in Vijay Mallya's case, it did fail, although Vijay Mallya didn't apply for a Rule 39. He only tried the Supreme Court. In Vijay Mallya's case, he didn't get the point of law of public importance certified. So then we were expecting him to be extradited within 28 days of that decision. And in fact, he hasn't gone back.
So which brings me to the point, Naomi, about asylum. Has Nirav Modi applied for asylum? Would we know if he had already applied for asylum? Are those applications public? Because we're not very clear on how these rules work in the United Kingdom. Because for Vijay Mallya as well, it was only after his extradition orders were put through that we realized that he'd put in for an asylum application already.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the asylum application, even the Indian government wouldn't know about it. So, in fact, it's very secret and the reporters wouldn't know about it. It's not public. And these are private hearings that happen under different tribunal altogether. I think it's the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal, and they have their own judges, and it's closed court. It's not open to the public. Even the judgments are private. They're not disclosed. So if somebody applies for asylum, no one knows about it. And if they get the asylum, no one knows about it either. So the Indian High Commission wouldn't know about it. What we do know is that every time we've inquired about it, we've been told that Vijay Mallya hasn't gone back for legal reasons. And if I've tried to ask more about that, barrister I spoke to said it's likely to be either asylum or it could be the civil cases that he's got going in the UK, because he's got quite a few civil cases like his bankruptcy appeal and cases like that. It could be this because of those that he hasn't gone back. So we're not exactly sure why Vijay Mallya hasn't gone back. Nirav Modi is very likely to have applied for asylum, I would say. And he may have applied already. You wouldn't necessarily wait till the final judgment comes and then put in your asylum application. You would probably have done it already, like during the process, after your initial extradition court hearing or something. But the asylum application can take years because there's lots of different layers of appeal. So it can drag on for quite some time. And if Vijay Mallya has applied, he could still be in the process. We don't know whether a decision would yet have been reached in his case.
Naomi, I just want you to draw the comparisons and how these cases were very different. The illustrious bad boy billionaire Vijay Mallya, which you would have had the opportunity to see him go in and out of court. But in Nirav Modi's case, he's been in jail and then there was COVID, so there was video links and the case was quite behind the scenes. Compare the two cases for us.
Well, Vijay Mallya was great fun to cover as a journalist because he always turned up in a chauffeur-driven car with his girlfriend, the one who had been an air hostess with Kingfisher Airlines. And they would always come together. Sometimes his son would come and he sort of turned up with shades on and, dressed like a model. And he'd always have a little entourage of people carrying things for him. And he'd always sort of stand outside court and get his cigar out and his posh lighter and sort of strike his cigar, and then we'd all surround him and then he'd start giving us little sound bites. And at lunch, Vijay Mallya, it was very odd actually, because he always used to go outside at lunch, and then of course all the media would rush outside and then he'd be able to give us statements. So I think he actually quite enjoyed the publicity. And then at the end of the case, it would be exactly the same. So, it was always high drama and great fun. Nirav Modi, as you probably recall, he was actually found by the Daily Telegraph wearing that ostrich hide jacket, sort of wandering through the streets near Oxford Street. And they tried to interview him and he just kept saying no comments. And there's a video of it. And then he flags down a taxi.
Can you please just confirm whether you've applied for political asylum? That's all I want to know. Can you confirm that? Sorry, no comment.
Well, it was about a week or two after that he got arrested opening a bank account in Metro Bank. And then he's been in custody since that moment. He was then brought to court the next day for his preliminary hearing. And they get asked, do you want to be extradited to India or not? And then they say no. And then it becomes an extradition hearing. And then he got taken to Wandsworth jail. So he then used to come in person from the jail. So he'd come in a prison van and then come up to the dock and stand there. I remember his first few hearings, he was really smartly dressed. He looked like the same guy, like the diamond dealer that hangs out with celebrities. And then I think obviously because of COVID, it then became video links. And then he's only ever come on video links since then from prison. So we just sort of see him on video in the court and he sits there with all his papers. But over time, and as they started to talk about this depression that he had, he sort of grew a beard and he started to look much more disheveled, and he put on weight as well. And he didn't look the same as the initial Nirav that used to come in person. And then they said he was taking antidepressants and things. But this was when he'd been living in this swanky apartment just Oxford Street, which was where he was living when he was running this jewelry business called Diamond Holdings. And I remember there was this moment when the barrister spoke about him having a dog, and it was one of the reasons why he should get bail, and I remember he looked really upset when this dog got mentioned.
Naomi, while we have you, I want to clarify something. There's a lot of speculation, buzz around the new trade deal that's being signed between India and the UK. Will extradition be part of that trade deal? Will it be incorporated in some way? What are you picking up? Because I understand that you do have some clarity on that.
Yes, I have checked this out because it's often said on Twitter and else in social media that, if the UK extradites Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi, then Prime Minister Modi will sign the trade deal within seconds. And that's just speculation on social media. It's not anything that is a fact. And when I checked it out, I was told that there was just no correlation at all. These extradition cases have no connection to the trade deal. They're not influencing the trade deal. And the trade deal has nothing to do with these two cases. And that came from the Indian government. So, and I think that probably is the truth, because it would be very odd if a single person was sort of held to ransom over this trade deal. And of course, in the UK, these cases are all going through the UK courts. So again, when the Indian public criticize the UK government for not extraditing these people, it's actually not the UK government that's making the decision. It's the judges and the court system. And we have a separation of powers, and our judiciary is separate to the government. So a lot of people try and bring it into the political sphere, but in fact, it's literally just going through our court system.
Well, that settles the speculation on the trade deal, but this case and the drama in this case for Nirav Modi far from over. Thank you, Naomi, for joining us here on the Morning Brief, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon as more twists and turns appear.
Thank you. It's lovely chatting to you.
Well, that was now and what could happen next. But where did it all start? We take you on a rewind to bring you back the full story of Nirav Modi. I recall that it was Valentine's Day 2018 and red was flashing all over the screens as India's second largest bank, Punjab National Bank or PNB, unearthed what would be the biggest scam faced by an Indian bank yet. 11,000 crores and counting, with the main cast featuring fugitive Mama Bhanja duo, Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi. What followed was complete pandemonium, from billionaires on the run to a blame game between the RBI and the centre, and bankers scrambling to assess the full extent of the hit, and investigative agencies jumping into action, but after the key accused had already taken off. And as many await a potential return of Nirav Modi, the Economic Times team gets you the ringside view of the scam. Joining us, Sangita Mehta, buzzing with everything to do with banking, and Rashmi Rajput, who has a hawk's eye when it comes to investigations. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much, Anupriya. Thank you for having me.
Sangita, let's start with you. For the rest of us, it was a big day of disclosure on Valentine's Day. But behind the scenes, I'm sure it was a classically hectic breaking news day for the reporters. Tell us how it really all played out.
Yeah. PNB announced about it first thing in the morning when the exchange opened. But it was quite a noisy day because we were just trying to figure out what is this all about? Like, what is an LOU? And we've never really looked into how LOU could be a scam. And the sheer magnitude of the fraud. It was 1.77 billion, which in today's time, it will be roughly 14,000 crore. Back then, it was 11,300 crore. But then it was these things which really caught us, and we were calling banks to understand where is this taking us and things like that. But we all missed the first sign of it. This was evolving and it was happening behind the scene, but we never realized, because on 5th of Feb, the bank gave a very innocuous notice to the exchange that it suspected a fraud of 280 crore at one of its branch. That's it. And then the second line was even more interesting. It said that the fraud is reported to the regulatory agency and investigative authorities. So they didn't mention anything about FIR or the CBI involved or any such thing. It's only in hindsight we know that, it was detected at least a month ahead of 14th of Feb. And in those days, I used to go to Brady House branch very regularly. I knew a lot of people out there. So personally, for me, it was quite a shock that these are the people whom I used to regularly interact and things like that. And the other side, these banks were all blaming PNB. PNB itself was kind of, trying to water down the whole thing that, we've recalled the loan from Nirav Modi, everything is going to be okay. And by then, Nirav Modi had already left the country. Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, both of them, no?
Right. And we'll get to that timeline of how the accused were actually tipped off much before the agencies were, which gets me to you, Rashmi, now. What did the investigative agencies do next?
29th of January is when PNB registered its official complaint with the CBI. And that time around, it had pegged the scam to around 280 crores because the amount of LOUs that time issued, whatever they could find, was amounting to 280 crores. Now, I'll just tell you one interesting anecdote, around LOUs. Now, what happened is during the course of the investigation, the CBI went to raid. They figured out that most of these LOUs, which were original LOUs signed by Gokula Shetty, which was one of the accused in the case, that they were stacked in the office of a very leading law firm in Mumbai. So the CBI had got this information. They wanted to act on it fast because they thought that, this was very important, this crucial piece of evidence. So when they went there were no LOUs to be found because they had already moved, because somebody had already informed the law firm. And one of the accused was arrested by the CBI. He subsequently had, during the recording of the statement, said that he actually had got 3 to 4 tempos outside that law firm and moved that with those LOUs from that law firm to a small room in Zaveri Bazaar. So subsequently, the CBI went and raided it, and then they found those original LOUs, which were stacked in a small room of around 200 square feet. So think about it, Anupriya, you had a scam of amounting to 14,000 crore, which is actually all the documents, the main evidence was in a room which was less than 200 square feet. So this is one of those, interesting anecdotes of the investigation. What was very important for both the CBI, first complaint was registered by this PNB on the 29th of January. The CBI, in a day or two's time, they registered an FIR. And subsequently, the Enforcement Directorate stepped in and they registered a money laundering offense. And then you had both the CBI and the ED probing the case of probing both the nephew, uncle duo. And initially, the scam, which the PNB Bank had said was around 280 crores, it has now ballooned and it is now around more than 23,000 crores.
A rather large difference between the initial estimate of the fraud and what it actually came out to be. Sangita, take us through the nature of the fraud, because that is critical in understanding how this actually all transpired.
So basically, PNB issued letter of undertaking to this Mama Bhanja, that is Nirav and Mehul Choksi's companies. Now, what is a LOU? LOU is like an implicit guarantee that if companies of Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi doesn't pay, then I as PNB take the responsibility to make good the difference or whatever is the gap. Now, this Nirav Modi's company takes this letter, goes to the Hong Kong branch of Union Bank. So already the money is siphoned out of India when he goes to Union Bank, right, in Hong Kong. And he tells them that transfer this 100 million to my ex-company, which is probably his own personal account. He gives an instruction to transfer it to some third account. So what happens is the money moves from PNB India to Hong Kong branch of Union Bank. And from the Union Bank Hong Kong branch, it moves to his personal account. Union Bank is paying this money to Nirav Modi because it's backed by a LOU which says that, if there's a default, PNB will pay. PNB is a government-owned bank, Union Bank government-owned bank. They both will trust each other and this thing goes on. So Union Bank then makes a claim to PNB that, Nirav Modi has raised this money from us, so you kind of make good the difference or make good that money. So PNB then credits 100 million to Union Bank. And the RBI rules are very clear. If there's a LOU which is backed by a bank, another Indian bank has to honor it. And you won't believe PNB issued LOI of 293. 293 LOIs were issued by PNB in this entire 8 years, that cycle of 177 billion. And it remained unnoticed. I mean, it all happened in one branch by one person remained unnoticed.
So, Sangita, this is one person that we're talking about, the primary person responsible at the desk at PNB. It's quite amazing how much power and how consistently he was on just this desk to be able to execute all of these LOUs for Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi's company.
Yeah. And even more surprising was that he was on the same desk for 7 years and doing the same work. In a bank, the policy is that every 3 years you have to be transferred, at least be transferred out of city or, on a different bank branch kind of thing. But in this 7 years, he was due for transfer twice. And mysteriously, both the times, there was somebody in the bank who stopped it. And that still remains a mystery that how did that happen? In fact, after this episode where Golaknath Shetty remained in the branch, there was a policy initiative that, no person in any bank, in any branch, be it private, PSU, whatever, can be there for more than 3 years.
So, Sangita, there are large amounts, multiple LOUs being signed off from a single desk, no reconciliation and no red flags. Where does the tide turn for the branch to realize something is wrong?
That is very interesting. So what happened is, as I said, it was all done by one person. His name was Golaknath Shetty. And he was a very junior person, deputy manager, clerical level. So he issued these letters, he would roll over these letters of LOU. Till such time, he retired in December 2018. And once he retired, the new person came. The new staff was deputed in his place. By then, in the month of December, he had already issued some LOUs to Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi companies. Now, those LOUs had already reached the Hong Kong, Dubai, London branches of Indian banks. And those branches came back to PNB in the month of January, making a claim for that amount. When they came, the new staff said that I am not authorized to give you because these LOUs are not backed by securities and there is some mismatch. He raised this issue with his senior, and then in the mid of January, the entire Brady House branch staff realized that there is a discrepancy in this entire thing, and that's how the whole chain broke.
So even as PNB discovers it, comes to the investigative agencies, it's all too late. Because as the playbook learnt even during the previous cases, even such as Malia, they had made their getaways before the agencies even came along. In fact, Rashmi, there were some stark revelations about how early these exits were planned by the likes of Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, who in fact already had a citizenship of another country.
Exactly. In this case also, Anupriya, they had planned their escape well in advance. If our sources are to be believed, this happened in around April of 2017 itself. Now, what these people tell us is that around that time is when Golaknath Shetty had for the first time told both Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi that, he's going to retire in January 2018. And the new staff that would be taking over, they might not be that cooperative with him and with them. And they might not be able to carry forward issuing the fraudulent LOUs. So that is when both of them decided that this was going to be an end of their dream run. So in around June of that year, Nirav Modi had already shifted his kids to the US. And on 1st January, when Golaknath Shetty retired, on the same day, both Nirav Modi, his wife and his brother-in-law, they left the country. And 5 days later, you had Mehul Choksi leaving the country. So they had actually planned their escape well in advance before the PNB bank could go and even register a case. And what the CBI had also found out that, in the month of November, two of its executives, two of the officials who later both the agencies managed to bring them back, they had also escaped. So, all this was happening in 2017. And then it was only in 2018 when there was a huge explosion happened when PNB finally figured out that, there was this massive scam that was happening at that Brady House branch of theirs. But it was too little too late for them.
Rashmi, you mentioned about Nirav Modi's wife and brother-in-law, but the other interesting character in this entire plot was Mehul Choksi, who, as we mentioned, had already taken a valid citizenship and moved to another country. Where, according to the investigative agencies, Rashmi, does Mehul Choksi fit into this entire scheme of fraud?
Now, he is actually responsible for more than 50% of the scam. So you have around 6,500 crore, which was pegged towards Nirav Modi, and 7,000 odd crores, which was pegged towards Mehul Choksi. I'm talking about the initial days in May 2018, when the CBI had pegged the scam to around 13,500 crores. The amount attributed to Mehul Choksi is more than that of Nirav Modi. Now, in case of Mehul Choksi, what also happened is somewhere in May of 2018, there was this spar between the agencies because Antigua, the country, came out saying that Mehul Choksi is their resident. And that's when the Indian agencies were trying to figure out that how did he manage to get the citizenship. So then you had a spar that happened between the MEA and the Mumbai police, where the MEA was saying that the Mumbai police gave him something called as the PCC, which is the verification, the police verification certificate, based on which the Antigua government had issued the citizenship to him. And the Mumbai police said that, when we had done a verification in 2017, there was no case against him. So how can we not give him a clearance certificate? So there was just so many things that were happening. And they figured out that actually he had done all this activity of getting the citizenship happened in 2017 itself. And he managed to do it. So Mehul Choksi, he got the citizenship, and then later, subsequently, he claims now that there was an attempt by the government to so-called kidnap him.
That's what I want to come to you. A lot of our listeners, want to really know, because we've read about it. Mehul Choksi, after ages, came back on air to talk about being, distressed. So what can you tell us about the very famous spoiled kidnapping, Rashmi?
Okay. The allegation that Mehul Choksi had leveled was that he was kidnapped by the Indian government, and that, there were these attempts to bring him back. The government was trying to take him back to India. Now, those are allegations. Right now, we won't be able to substantiate whether that really happened and whether that was a failed attempt by the Indian agencies. But he has registered a case of claiming that he was kidnapped by the Indian agencies. So that is where it stands officially. But if you see in the case itself, there are a lot of intriguing factors, because he went missing, then his wife registered a complaint, and then he was found in another country, Dominica. And then subsequently, Dominica also dropped the charges against him. And then now he plans to even register a case of kidnapping. So it is it's very interesting about how things work in the Caribbean island.
So now by this point, the main cast and crew of the scam have moved overseas. Sangita, this brought about a big back and forth between the center and the gatekeeper of the banks, the RBI. I recall from the late Arun Jaitley to then very suddenly vocal Urjit Patel as well.
Yeah. So, basically the question was who will foot the bill? It was a huge amount, 12,000 crore that had to be provided. Otherwise, the bank will collapse. Finance Ministry kind of raised this issue that, the RBI was a gatekeeper, as you correctly said, that they didn't kind of regulate banks properly. And then I have this very interesting comment, which I just wanted to read out from a speech that Arun Jaitley made back then, that he said that we must always remember that regulators have a very important function. They ultimately decide the rules of the game, and they must be the third eye. But unfortunately, in Indian system, it is we politicians who are accountable and not the regulators. Now, this was a very, very provocative statement from Arun Jaitley. And then it was very natural that Urjit Patel will retort. No? And then he gave his famous speech that success has many fathers, but failures have none. I mean, if you recollect, where he said that RBI should be given powers to regulate PSU banks as they regulate private banks. And of course, then 6 months later, he resigned, as you would recollect, December. Yes. Urjit Patel put in his papers.
But Rashmi, as the fingers are being pointed between the center and the RBI, there's also much to be said between what was happening in the investigative agencies. In 2017, as early as 2017, Nirav Modi was already being probed by the Income Tax Department. And yet, the asymmetrical information between agencies is what aided the release or the movement of the likes of Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi. Share with us what was happening behind the scenes, and also kind of the moments that have stuck with you as you've covered this massive case.
There have been a lot of interesting, so to say, milestone kind of while you cover the case. Nirav Modi was actually investigated by other agencies also. Income tax department was investigating him. The DRI was investigating him. I remember when he used to go to the DRI office, he used to carry his mineral water. And he was very particular about drinking only that particular brand of water. And he was very well dressed, and it was very difficult to say that this person is later going to become the face of a white collar offense in India. Though he was being probed by the income tax department and the DRI, that information wasn't shared with the other agencies. So what actually the Nirav Modi case did was that, it has brought many of the agencies together. So now you have a lot of coordination that happened between the agencies.
Sangita, Rashmi says that the agencies have learned a lesson and have been better at sharing information. But has anything changed on the regulation and supervision part when it comes to PSU banks and bankers in general? Have things changed on the ground, or are we still susceptible to hear headlines like this once again?
This particular gap is more or less bridged. Core banking is linked to SWIFT, and there is a regular risk-based supervision, which is an online, and then RBI has started this CRILIC system where each bank has access to how much exposure other banks in the system has to a particular company. But it's not fully watertight as yet, because RBI still doesn't have that kind of regulatory powers. RBI cannot supersede the board of PSUs. RBI cannot even remove the MD of a bank, PSU bank. He can't even say that, that this person is not fit to run the PSU bank. But point is that we have improved, but there is a lot of room yet, a lot of room to get better.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Sangita and Rashmi, for your time. And I'm sure this case is far from over, as they say, picture abhi baki hai. So more twists and turns still expected in the Nirav Modi saga.
I always will have sleepless nights, but we will move forward.
That was Nirav Modi over 6 years ago talking to the BBC about having sleepless nights over massive expansion. And I'm sure he continues to have sleepless nights, but for very different reasons. The scam exposed cracks in information sharing, in supervision, and also disclosures. But as Naomi pointed out, it may be too early to plan a homecoming for the flawed and fallen diamond magnate Nirav Modi. With that, I, your host Anupriya, am signing off on this edition of The Morning Brief, brought to you by The Economic Times. A big thanks to the team that helped put this together, our producer Sumit Pandey, sound engineer Indril Bhattacharjee, and a special shout out to the team at BCS Ragasur for the rocking signature tune we debuted today. Executive producers for TMB, Anirban Chaudhary, Arujit Burman, and yours truly. Do follow us to get notified when our episode drops next, which is every week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. It promises to be an action-packed week ahead. Thank you for tuning in.